What if this is actually a prison planet and we are future prisoners? No, this is not an episode of Black Mirror. This is a real bona fide theory from me. I mean, it could be an episode of Black Mirror, I'm not sure. Because these days, when somebody murders a load of people, they go to jail and get life imprisonment. But people always say, it's not enough. It doesn't feel like justice. And they're probably right. Now, we could go down the philosophical route and have a discussion about death and tragedy. I think we all, in grief for a loved one, always feel a sense of injustice at the hands of death. But you can see what these people mean when faced with someone who has, say, murdered a bunch of children in a callous and horrific way. When said murderer gets life imprisonment, they get to live out the rest of their life in prison until their death. But for the victims, they will never be satisfied because they don't feel like true justice has ever been done. But I may have a solution. What if VR and some clever technology could in fact give us the key to true justice?
And our interrogatee? Well, a mean-spirited cop sets his virtual reality to advance 1,000 years every minute to torture the copied consciousness of the murderer that they just convicted 5 minutes ago.
What if, in the very near future, we could create a simulation to put prisoners inside to serve what they think is a 500-year prison sentence? That would be true justice. The murderer would serve the life sentences that is deemed appropriate and sentenced inside simulations. That would be horrific, their worst nightmare. Or they could be corrective simulations to help them, say, realise the error of their ways and correct the mental bit of their brain that made them do such a callous and horrific thing. And you know, prison these days is not all sunshine and rainbows, that's for sure. It's a bit like that joke, where do naughty rainbows go? Prison! Actually, my only run-in with the law was due to a joke, so you wouldn't be the first to find these jokes criminal. I actually worked in a fish and chip shop and my boss didn't like my fish jokes, so I battered him. Well, what if I told you we're not too far away from being able to sentence prisoners to 500-year sentences? I think this, what I'm about to tell you, will be the future of prisons. But there's a couple of hurdles to get over before we can do this and deliver true justice. Number one, we need to be able to simulate lifelike worlds, indistinguishable from reality, for ultimate immersion and realism. It would need to act and behave exactly like the real world. Number two, we need to invent something that would simulate time moving much slower for the person inside the simulation, so that a normal 25-year sentence would feel like 250 years.
3 weeks sound good? That should give you a taste.
No, wait, what do you mean, 3 weeks?
If you just wait for just...
And number three, we need to get the prisoner to forget that they're going into a simulation. Essentially, we need them to forget who they are. With technology progressing at its current rate, I would hazard a haphazard guess at between 15 to 30 years before this is possible. We are creating nearly lifelike worlds with graphical upgrades from Unreal Engine 5 for video games. And with VR headsets about to become the norm in about 5 to 10 years, but still at the moment in their infancy. It's only a matter of time before they're commonplace. Now for point two. Point two has almost nearly been overcome. I quote an article from Business Insider. Prisoners could serve 1,000-year sentences in 8.5 hours in the future. Future biotechnology could be used to trick a prisoner's mind into thinking they have served a 1,000-year sentence, a group of scientists have claimed. A second scenario would be to upload human minds to computers to speed up the rate at which the mind works. Quote, if the speed up were a factor of a million, a millennium of thinking would be accomplished in 8.5 hours. Uploading the mind of a convicted criminal and running it at 1,000,000 times faster than normal would enable the uploaded criminal to serve 1,000-year sentence in 8.5 hours. This would obviously be much cheaper for the taxpayer than extending criminals' lifespans to enable them to serve 1,000 years in real time. So that's been done nearly. For the third point, if we're smart enough to create lifelike simulations and be able to extend people's perception of time, then I think we'll be able to invent a little tablet which makes you forget who you are temporarily as you enter the simulation and have a new life as a messed up druggie, and to create the simulation, entering the prisoner into the simulation and making the prisoner forget or not know that they are entering a simulation. It could even form the basis of new entertainment shows, which would be a bit dystopian, that's for sure, but it could happen. We don't know what the future will be like, do we? So it could be like a game show, for instance, where you get to watch and comment on the prisoner as they go around in their simulation acting their normal life.
Welcome back to Remote Control, a brand new game show where the studio audience decides what happens to Chris, our unsuspecting member of the public. The audience are wearing masks to preserve their anonymity, and Chris, our target, has no idea that he's being filmed tonight. So, just before the break, our audience voted that Chris from Essex would have to cope with our angry boyfriend. So let's make it happen.
You could possibly enter into that simulation and do unspeakable things to the prisoner. It could be televised and you could tune in and watch it, maybe even vote for things you'd like to see happen to that prisoner. Now let's take another leap in logic and say that we are actually already inside that simulation. I've blown your bloody mind, haven't I? What if we are actually the prisoners and that we have, in the reality above this one, done something unspeakable? And thus, we are placed into this simulation, injected with drugs to simulate the passing of time, moving much slower. They keep us docile, asleep, and plugged in, which is much cheaper than the current prison system. And maybe it's just my fudged up brain that thinks these sorts of things could be a possibility. And maybe I will get carted off to the nut out and put in a simulation. But if we can assume that simulations will one day exist, then you have to assume and accept the fact that we are probably in one right now. And who's to say what type of simulation it is? We could be prisoners in the future, placed into a simulation against our will to be corrected or to be punished. So if we can assume then that simulations will one day exist, then why can we not assume the next stage, which is the application of simulations in all walks of life? You will go to school inside a simulation. You will socialise inside a simulation. You will shag inside a simulation. You will work inside a simulation. You will train inside a simulation. Therefore, how can we rule out the fact that you will serve your prison sentence inside a simulation? I can't, you can't. Therefore, there is a possibility, admittedly a slim one, if you can accept that we're in a simulation right now, that this one could be a prison sentence. I mean, I doubt it. I don't want to believe that's true, but it's an interesting concept and it's bound to happen one day, regardless of whether we think it will or not. It's inevitable. These videos give people an existential crisis. Trust me, I know. So watch this video next, which will tell you how to get over an existential crisis.